Hi. In this seventh and final section of The Ages of Life, Schopenhauer concludes his work Counsels and Maxims by comparing the different stages of a human life to the planets. I should note that Schopenhauer will deal here only with 8 planets. Pluto was not discovered until the 1930s, long after this was written in 1850, and the planet Neptune was discovered only, I think, in 1846, shortly before this book was composed. You'll see him make mention of that. Here's what he writes. Let's see. A man's individual character is not, as astrology wishes to make out, to be predicted from observation of the planets, but the course of human life in general, as far as the various periods of it are concerned, may be likened to the succession of the planets, so that we may be said to pass under the influence of each one of them in turn. At 10, Mercury is in the ascendant, and at that age a man like this planet is characterized by extreme mobility within a narrow sphere, where trifles have a great effect upon him. But under the guidance of so crafty and eloquent a god, he easily makes great progress. Venus begins her sway during his 20th year, and then a man is wholly given up to the love of women. At 30, Mars comes to the front, and he is now all energy and strength, daring, pugnacious, and arrogant. When a man reaches the age of 40, he is under the rule of the 4 asteroids. That is to say, his life has gained something in extension. He is frugal. In other words, by the help of Ceres, he favors what is useful. He has his own hearth by the influence of Vesta. Pallas has taught him that which is necessary for him to know, and his wife, his Juno, rules as the mistress of his house. Footnote, Schopenhauer's footnote. The other asteroids, which have been discovered since, are an innovation, and I shall have nothing to do with them. My relation to them is that of professors of philosophy to me. I ignore them because they do not suit my book. Back to the text. But at the age of 50, Jupiter is the dominant influence. At that period, a man has outlived most of his contemporaries, and he can feel himself superior to the generation about him. He is still in the full enjoyment of his strength, and rich in experience and knowledge. And if he has any power and position of his own, he is endowed with authority over all who stand in his immediate surroundings. He is no more inclined to receive orders from others. He wants to take command himself. The work most suitable to him now is to guide and rule within his own sphere. This is the point where Jupiter culminates, and where a man of 50 years is at his best. Then comes Saturn, at about the age of 60, a weight as of lead, dull and slow. And here he quotes Shakespeare. But old folks, many feign as they were dead, unwieldy, slow, heavy, and pale as lead. That's from Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scene 5. Last of all, Uranus, or, as the saying is, a man goes to heaven. I cannot find a place for Neptune, as this planet has been very, very thoughtlessly named, because I may not call it as it should be called, Eros. Otherwise I should point out how beginning and end meet together, and how closely and intimately Eros is connected with death, how Orcus, or Amenethes, as the Egyptians called him, is not only the receiver but the giver of all things. Lemathon kai didos, which I think refers to something like their being born as twins, Eros and death. Okay. Death is the great reservoir of life. Everything comes from Orcus. Everything that is alive now was once there. Could we but understand the great trick by which that is done, all would be clear. And those are the final words of Counsels and Maxims by Arthur Schopenhauer. A very fun little comparison here, walking us through the different stages of life, decade by decade, with sort of Jupiter as being the commanding figure when a person is at his sort of the peak of his powers, and then the decline into old age, senility, and heaven. The suggestion that the planet Neptune ought to have been named the planet Eros, so that would have been fun if that had been the case. But and Schopenhauer's great footnote. Right, I'd simply ignore them because they don't suit my book, just as the professors of philosophy have marginalized and ignored me. So there's the conclusion of Counsels and Maxims, and of this series about Counsels and Maxims. My final thoughts on Schopenhauer and on this work, I found him to be surprisingly humane and enjoyable. He's a witty writer. He gives, I think, some very good advice, what I've several times in this series called dad advice, as though he's just a sort of elderly figure letting us know, hey, look, kid, this is how the world is, and here's how you can conduct yourself to be a little bit less miserable than you would have been if you hadn't listened to me. I think, although he gets bitter at some places, and there are a few places where I think a certain kind of personal animosity shines through, I think for the most part, Schopenhauer is able to be, how shall I put this? He's acerbic without being acid, and I think he's misanthropic, but a sort of humane misanthropy. He's misanthropic without being malicious. He doesn't seem to have it out for people he regards as inferior. He simply wants to live free of them and to give advice to people whom he thinks might profit by it, people who have a sort of superior intellectual capability and struggle then in society. He wants them to have this kind of self-understanding. He also does a fairly good job of occasionally, but not in an overwhelming way, linking some of his practical advice here to his metaphysical theories about the will, the idea that there's this sort of life force behind and underneath all of the universe, all of the living universe, that drives us to sort of strive and struggle towards something, but that our ultimate happiness comes, especially we realize this in old age, our ultimate happiness will come from simply giving up on and abstaining from that struggle and seeking a certain kind of inner peace. So I appreciate you staying with this series all the way to the end and with this book. If you have some opinions about it or you'd like me to take on some other project of Schopenhauer's, please leave a comment on this video or elsewhere. Thanks very much. Thanks for watching today, and goodbye.